Hi, I'm Gabby from Ray Studios, and today I'm going to be reviewing the Canon RF 24 to 240 millimeters. So first, let's take a closer look. This lens is mostly plastic, but it feels like really good plastic. It comes with a plastic lens hood. I already have attached a UV filter. I'm going to take it out quickly so you can see it better. The front element is relatively small for such a big lens. I mean, it's not big, but it has a pretty big telephoto, so it goes from wide to telephoto. Of course, here the mount is metal, like all RF lenses, and as I zoom in, the front of the lens will extend quite significantly. It's almost double the size. When it comes to size and weight, it's very similar to the 24 to 105. So if you come from EF lenses, you're going to be familiar with that size and weight. But the advantage here is that you don't need to use an adapter. So, you know, it's kind of pretty compact for such a lens. Then we have two switches, which is a stabilization on and off. And then we have a focus that can change from focus to control. That's because instead of having three rings, like most of the RF lenses, this one have only two. So one that controls the zoom, and one that is the multifunctional ring that you can have it to control something like the ISO or the aperture. And if you want to change to focus, then you come to here and change to focus. I have it set up to ISO as I normally use this lens with autofocus. I mounted the lens on my Canon EOS R so you can get a quick look of how this looks like. It's not very front heavy, it balances pretty well, even so it's a relatively long lens, but if you go telephoto, yeah, then it's pretty front heavy and it becomes a very large lens, especially for the Canon EOS R that is not particularly a very big camera. Unless you have the battery grip, then you know, you have more stability. Now, let's take a look at image quality. When it comes to image quality, I gotta say, I look at the pictures on the back of the screen on my camera and I was like, this is not bad at all. But when I put the pictures on my computer and open them in Lightroom and turn off all corrections, I was pretty worried about what I was seeing because the vignetting was incredible. I mean, basically this lens at the wide end doesn't cover the entire session of a full frame camera. So that was pretty alarming. I was like, whoa, what's going on? And as soon as I turn on corrections, everything got normal again. But it's taking away some of your field of view. So instead of being a 24mm lens, it's more like a 28 or a 30. The vignetting in this is pretty heavy. You must use corrections on all the time. So even if you are editing raw pictures, you need to turn corrections on in Lightroom. That being said, I think the pictures, generally speaking, it looks good. You gotta understand, this is a super zoom lens, this is not a prime lens. There is a decent amount of sharpness, especially in the center, and as it's going towards the corners, it's getting a little bit softer. Like I say, this is not the sharpest lens in the world, but it does the trick. I mean, it takes okay pictures. This is basically a very versatile lens. It can do it all. It doesn't do anything particularly very good, but it's good. So it's kind of like a lens that you want to carry around if you only want to have one lens and you don't worry that much about sharpness, like super sharp pictures. I mean, it's sharp, but it's not super sharp. When it comes to bokeh, actually I was surprised to see that, yeah, you can manage to get bokeh with this lens, decently good bokeh, and the bokeh rendition is surprisingly good. This is a relatively slow lens because at the widest end is f4 and at the telephoto end is 6.3. So I wouldn't quite recommend this for low light photography. Shooting at night with this lens could be a little bit problematic because you're gonna have to bump the ISO quite a lot. And that being said, I think that the transmission is actually even worse than the f-stop. So it's a f6.3, but the transmission is more like a t8. Basically, the difference between f-stops and t-stops is the f-stop is kind of like the measure of the diameter of the lens, while t-stop is how much light actually hit the sensor. So that f6.3 is not really f6.3 when it comes to low light. It's more like a f8, f9, or let's call it t8, t9. The same will happen at the wide end where you say f4 and it's more like a t4.5 or t5. So for low light, definitely wouldn't recommend this lens unless you want noisy pictures. This is a lens that is highly recommended for someone who wants a lot of versatility. Recently, I went to the zoo, take my daughter there to have a fun weekend afternoon, and it was very helpful to bring this lens because I could get ultra wide when I needed ultra wide, and I could get telephoto and get really close, up close into the animals. I mean, I get like a close-up portrait of a tiger face. I mean, that's pretty incredible. And if I didn't have bring this lens, it would have been quite tricky to do that because, you know, you can't walk in or out like I would with a prime lens from a tiger cage, right? So, you know, having an ultra zoom lens sometimes can be very helpful. It was very helpful for me a few days ago. And to be honest, all the samples that I got, they're okay. They're pretty okay. Like I say, this is not a prime lens, it's a super zoom lens. It's very versatile, very helpful. And, you know, of course, there are gonna be some trade-off in quality, such as not super sharp pictures. It's sharp enough. To be honest, I haven't noticed much chromatic aberration. Bokeh was alright. It's just that at the wide end it's quite weak. Basically, you don't get a 24mm, you're getting more like a 20 or a 30. And towards the telephoto, there is also pink cushion distortion. But I'm okay with pink cushion distortion. That's alright. And especially with current shots on, you won't even notice it. So it's kind of like, it's okay. So this lens is pretty good at many scenes, not very good at anything in particular. I hope you enjoyed this review, and if you have, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, and I'll catch you up on the next video.